Gentlemen, welcome to the Be the Man podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning. Most of us make mistakes and have made mistakes in parenting and in marriage. We're rolling along. We're trying to do our best. Well, actually, sometimes some of us aren't trying to do our best. Maybe we're just rolling along, just existing, and we get in survival mode. My guest today is Curt Storring, and he is the host of the Dad Work podcast and the Dad Work movement. And he's helping entrepreneurial dads become as successful at home as they are in business and build the only legacy that really matters. And he tells his story in today's episode of his transformation. He was a terrible dad and husband and a man, and he had no direction and trying to figure it out and working like crazy and yelling, at home because he didn't know what to do. And then creating this transformation, right? This desperate need we all have to put an end to the chronic errors and mistakes and break the bad habits and the broken systems that are keeping us from being our best. And so in this episode, you guys are going to love this because we dive into a lot of specifics about how to even complimenting and building a relationship with your wife and how to tackle things from your past. Like we call it the undigested emotional hamburger or whatever, right? And how to work through with thinking and journaling and how to get into habits and routines and rituals, doing hard things, even down to homeschooling, and how men need to have more self-respect. And one of my favorite topics, we talk about being hard to kill and easy to love. So dive in. You're going to love this episode. Take notes if you can. There's a lot of nuggets here that are going to help you be the best version of yourself. Curt, man, glad to have you here, brother. Excited to have our conversation today. Why don't you give us a quick background to how you got to where you're at right now in this message and this mission that you have right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to be here. Love what you are doing. I mean, how could you not want to be the man, right? So yeah, man, I have been doing this. Let's see, I guess for 7 years now, like we were just saying before the recording, because I was a terrible dad and a terrible husband and not a very good man. In fact, I didn't even feel like a man at all. I felt like a little boy. And so I had my first son 9.5 years ago. I was like 23 or something like that. And I just had no direction. Didn't know what to do, didn't have any role models, didn't have like literally anything in my life other than, well, hey, great, you got some friends who are older than you who have kids, but then we moved away and we didn't have them anymore. So here I am, newly married, newly entrepreneurial, just quit my job to become a business owner, and we have this kid. And I'm working like 16-hour days. And he, as like a 1-year-old, he'd come into my office and I would just scream at him, man. I would scream at him because I didn't know that there was another way to do it. I would be so upset. I would be so frustrated that my life was out of control. Whereas, man, I built my identity on perfectionism, on having full control. And that was obviously like a defense mechanism.
Little kids come in and they're like, I don't care about your control.
No,
I don't care
not
about your perfectionism. It's like a wrecking ball to all the order we want in life.
Totally. And you know what? It's a lot of people talk about like marriage or travel being like the best way to level yourself up because it just throws you into crazy situations. For me, it was parenting. It was like, dude, you have to look at who you are because the way you're acting, you see that every single day when you yell at your kid and then you feel terrible about it.
Like it's holding up this mirror to the underdeveloped stuff that's inside of us.
Totally.
Well, and you already said something key, and I think it's worth pausing to even dive in right away. It was your frustration about the way you were doing life that comes out on the kids sometimes, right? Isn't that insightful? Where it builds up an irritation, a frustration, an insecurity, an anxiety, a fear, and in some cases, like some self-loathing. Right? If we know we're living below our potential, and then whatever it takes, I don't know, it can be anything, right? But something hits it and then we explode, and we explode on the people that are close to us. It's just that law of proximity, right? And a kid might do a little thing and get the full load.
Yes, man, there's two sides of that I experienced. One was I didn't know what I was doing, but there was unknown unknowns. So I didn't even know what I could be doing. I was like, something's wrong. It doesn't feel good. I wasn't doing things to support myself. Wasn't going to the gym. Didn't even know any of this stuff. And so what you said is 100% true. It's like, I don't feel good about this. And there's someone smaller than me I can take it out on. And it's not like I'm trying to do that, but being underdeveloped, you just do it anyway. And I've had to recover a lot from that. But the second thing is that I noticed is that, dude, I was living in the past. I was hurt. I was blaming, my parents. All these things that I thought I was trying to run away from were front of mind all the time. And I tell guys I work with, I call it the undigested hamburger metaphor. And so here's what it looks like. You're a kid, and just imagine for a second you eat a hamburger, right? But instead of it digesting and moving through your body, you don't have a digestive tract. So it just sits there. And in this example, what that is it's a perceived hurt from your parents, from a friend, from a bully. That's like something that happens to you that you don't have the emotional digestive system to actually digest. And so what it does is it sits down into your belly. This hamburger sits in your belly, and man, it kind of hurts. It's a little bit uncomfortable. Gas is forming. You're like, oh man, I don't know what's going on here, but nobody ever told me there's a digestion system. So I'm just going to keep going. Years go by, more years go by. You're an adult now. These hurts that you've been carrying, this hamburger that's been lodged in your belly for years. This is the original pain and trauma, if you will. All of a sudden, you're at the office and Bobby at the copier turns around, he elbows you in the belly. Well, what's going to happen when you get triggered, so to speak? Dude, it's going to blow up everywhere. And without making it too graphic, it's going to come out one or two ends. And that's what was happening with me. I was like, nobody ever gave me time when I was a kid. How dare you ask me for time now, son? Because I wasn't allowed to have stuff. I wasn't allowed to have feelings. So who do you think that I'm going to be talking to you as your dad now? And it's like, dude, you are living in the past. And I had to learn how to process all of that by talking to people, by getting coaches, joining men's group, learning more skills to be an adult human being before I was able to process that and then let it go. And so, yes, it was, the present wasn't very good, but dude, I had to get rid of the roadblocks from the past, which I help a lot of guys with now, because that's where so many of us are living. Even if we want the big vision, there's roadblocks all over the place. Dude, so that's a little bit about my story.
100%, just right there. It's amazing how much trouble those, I like the undigested things. It's like the unprocessed stuff. It brings up trouble. And it's interesting, you alluded to it, like how will we experience something and it wasn't pleasant, and yet ironically we turn around and do something really similar to our own kids. I remember meeting a gentleman one time. We were in some foreign country, and he was abusing his children. I'd become aware of it. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? And he's like, look, and he felt terrible. He's like, I beat my kids because I was beat as a kid. And the irony of that stood out. It was just his simple equation of like, dude, I got beat, and so I beat my kids. I'm like, it's hurt. I'm like, yeah, we just pass on the pain because it never got digested or processed. I'm writing my book right now. And just this morning I was writing about, Carl Jung calls it the shadow, right? We all have this shadow. And so we have these dark kind of corners of the soul, so to speak, or the mind or wherever. And the undigested stuff, right? We shove it in there. And I love how you said that. We don't have a developed enough digestive tract to really do something with it. We either don't know how, or we don't want to face it, right? He always talked about that. You don't want to face the shadow. So we stuff these things in the corners, but they don't go away. Just because we bury them doesn't mean they die. It's like more likely we bury it and it sprouts into trouble, right? And then the trouble comes up in instances like you're talking about, where anybody does something and bam, there it goes.
Totally. Yeah. And that's a lot of the stuff that I talk to guys about. It's like the shadow is where you don't want to look, but as soon as you shine light on it, you typically realize it's not quite as gnarly as you might think it is. But you're living in this, you don't have a flashlight when you're going through inertia in your life. And this is where I think intentionality comes in, is like, are you looking? Are you journaling? Are you thinking on the places in your life that are not serving you.
Yes.
And if you are, then it's like shining a flashlight to see that, oh, dude, that's actually just you in the shadows as like a scared 6-year-old.
Yep.
Okay. And when you can shine the light and be like, hey, dude, it's not that scary.
Yeah.
We don't need these coping mechanisms anymore because we're not actually 6. Yeah. That's when everything happens. So I think, like, I tell guys to communicate everything with a trusted mentor or man or whatever their men's group situation is like, and journal and just sit in quiet solitude so they can think. Because until we do that, you're just running a million miles an hour in the wrong direction into the shadow and you don't even realize it.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, I'm glad you touched on that.
Yes. And when you gave them, those are like rock solid strategies there. Even intentional thinking, and especially journaling, man. That's one of the things I love to say. My wife and I, when we were coaching people, what we say all the time, like, take it out on paper, not on people. I'm like,
dude, that is so good.
Get it on the paper, like vomit right on, like whatever, say all the pain, the hurt, everything, get it on paper. And then if you need to destroy that, like tear it up, burn it, whatever you got to do with it, great. But get it up, get it worked through, get it processed, and then you can connect with people. Then you can talk, right? And talk to trusted people. Sometimes we go and we're like, hey man, I got to get something off my chest. And so we vomit all over like a friend or a neighbor or a spouse or even a kid, heaven forbid. And afterwards you feel better, but the poor recipient's like covered in our emotional vomit now. We're like, dude, yes, is like, that was trouble right there. So processing it in a healthy way is indispensable.
Yeah, dude, I love that. I have so many people that I need to tell this to. I will. I wrote this down so I can give you credit, man. That's an incredible statement. And in fact, it's one of the things that we do regularly in our groups. I will get people to write letters to their fathers or their mothers, and I'll give them a specific like 3 or 4 step process to do this. Because honestly, this thing for me, my dad died, I think 8 years ago now, just about to the day actually. And dude, I would spend, like, there was a couple of years now. Yeah, it was a few years where I would every day in the shower, for some reason in the shower, maybe it's because I was alone, I'd just break down and be like, man, this sucks. I miss him. I don't have any leadership from him. Like, man, why did this have to happen to him? It was totally random. And so it wasn't until a few years down the line, I wrote him a letter to tell him everything I felt about his death and everything I had done until that point. Nice. After he died, with my family, my kids. And dude, that paper was tear stained. I tell you what, I could hardly read it afterwards. But when I finished writing that, and when I sealed it in an envelope and put it away, obviously you don't have to send this even if your parents are still alive, but you put that away, and after you write it down, dude, the weight was gone. Every once in a while you go, oh yeah, that sucks, wish dad was still around, but it's not a crippling thing anymore, simply because I wrote it down. And in fact, I don't know what it was. It's like an Instagram reel. Jordan Peterson was talking about this, and there was a study, and I don't know the exact thing, so you have to look up Jordan Peterson, but it was basically 2 groups of people going to psychotherapy. One group wrote down their story in a way that basically gives meaning to their suffering. The other group just went to talk therapy. Of the 2 groups, of the first 2 weeks of the ones who wrote their stories down, they were actually a little bit worse because it was fresh and it was hurting.
It's raw.
It's very raw. That's why people don't do it, because it hurts. But 6 months later, the people who went through that intense 2-week period of having written everything down, they saw the therapist way less because it was gone. There was no weight left over. And so, yeah, man, like, I love the way you put that. And I just said, jump on that. Because guys, if you're not journaling intentionally, you got to start.
Exactly. So powerful. I remember hearing that from Jordan Peterson and multiple other sources as well. There is a therapeutic power to writing, and we can type it out, but there's some really cool TED Talks on this, just people who want to geek out about the tactile movement of writing with pen or pencil on paper, and how it connects with the brain. And they watched the brain light up and how it works. And it lit up in a different way. It really lit up when we're doing tactile movement versus typing. It didn't do the same.
Wow, that's cool.
And so there's interest. What you're saying here is just getting this down and just getting it all out. There's like this magic power to that, man. And it seems so simple, so elementary, but many of us haven't touched it. Did you have a good relationship with your dad before he passed?
Man, it was it's one of those ones where he was there, but he was only there physically, in a sense.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I am so grateful. I had to grieve a lot. And that was grieving both his death, but also what I didn't get from him. Because I was being childish. I was blaming him for things as though he should have done better. Where in reality, man, I'm so blessed because he was a great man. He was a great dad. But I look back and go, why didn't you teach me anything, man?
Yeah.
Like I had all the freedom in the world, and that was good when I was 16. But in hindsight, man, I wish I had direction. I wish that he had taught me certain things. I wish he had expectations for me. And near the end, man, yeah, it wasn't a very close relationship. I don't think he was, I think, on his 4th marriage by that point. And I think that when I told him I was getting married, he was worried for me because it hadn't worked out for him.
Sure, that was his reality.
It was his reality, and it caused a rift.
Sure.
So, you know, the thank God, the last thing I can remember of my dad in person, he drove me to the airport. He let me drive his BMW M3 convertible. We had one of those little cigarillo things together. And I remember hugging him and saying, I love you. And I am so blessed. That is the very last thing we said to each other in person. But it was a mixed bag, man.
Wow. That's, I want to really emphasize and reemphasize what you said there of longing to have more direction and more training. So for the listeners, those of us who are dads or going to be dads or even grandpas, like that hit for me. Like we've got to level up as men and offer direction and guidance and training. Obviously, it needs to be done very tactfully with diplomacy. It needs to be, you know, where there's a good relationship. You're not trying to force stuff down people's throats. Nobody likes that. But if you have the relationship, yeah, I mean, we want the direction. We want the training. So my dad, he was gone when I was really little. My parents split, and the stepdads came and went, and none of them, right? The 5 or 6 of them that was there, none of them did that. Like, I mean, like I had to ask a buddy how to shave. So I was like, dude, I don't know what to do. I'm getting some peach fuzz. Like, I don't know. What do you do, man? Like nothing, right? And dating and those are all the things, like a bike tire or what, like fixing anything on a car. Like what? What's a bank account? Like I was trying to figure out all this crap. Same thing, like wishing I'd had the direction of the training. And I think we have a huge opportunity, but I would also say a moral obligation to give leadership and guidance and life skills and mentoring. Man, that's huge. I love that.
And this is one of the things that I think is like an underutilized tactic in becoming a good dad is think back to your childhood. What would you have wanted?
Yeah.
And then do that. And what did you hate? Don't do that.
Yep.
And I think like for me, fatherhood is support, but more importantly, it's guidance. It's support with guidance. It's support with leadership. So when they fall down, you help them up from the bike that they tipped over on. Yep. And whereas mom might be more of the, oh no, it's okay. Like just come here, only support. Dad goes, hey, come here, bud. Now get back on the bike.
Yep.
And that sort of thing, man, I know so many men who long for that. And we feel like there's this generational split or a generational gap where it's like we have to learn everything ourselves because there seems to have been a large group of dads beforehand who just didn't teach. And that is, who knows why that reason is. We could debate that all day, but I am witnessing so many men who feel as though they have to be the everything. Yep. They don't know the skills. Like I've got a list of like 100 things that I want my boys to learn. I've got 3 sons and some of them I know, like I can get them to be very disciplined. I can help them work out. I can help them start a business, but I don't know how to fish. I don't know how to hunt. I don't know how to like fix a car. I don't know any of these things. Nice. And it's like, man, I wish that I had a dad who taught me this stuff because he knew. Yep. There's a lot of stuff that he knew. And now I'm like, oh man, that's a lot to take on. So when over the next 10 years until they launch from my house, am I going to do that? And at first I was like panicking. It's like, dude, I'm never going to give my kids everything they need. That's tragic. And I will feel like a failure until I went, oh, other men, that is the answer. And it's other men who know how to do that. So I have a good friend. He's in one of my groups. He lives locally. He's going to take my oldest boy and I hunting.
Yeah.
And man, I am so excited because I would never have been able to do that for my son.
Yeah.
But now with introducing other good men, it's like I'm recreating my father basically with new impactful males in my life.
Yeah.
And I think all of us could use that because no matter how good we are as dads, we're always going to need more because we just can't be the end and the beginning. We can't be everything.
Exactly.
So we're going to need that. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do to replace that for my kids, but also kind of for me, man, because there's a lot that I still want to learn. So being around good men has been, man, it's so
huge.
impactful.
It's huge. And that's one more good reason to have this brotherhood of men around and to seek out mentors and training, anything from learning a language to any kind of life skill you want, anything you want to master. We legit, and I know almost every generation says this, but we legitimately live in like the greatest generation in the history of the earth, man, because it's whether it's books or podcasts like this or videos or reaching out, like you can go to any kind of training or course, like you can get the most elite training from cool dudes, and you pay for it, but it's worth every investment. We spend tens of thousands of dollars every year to make sure our kids are having that kind of training, those kind of experiences. And it's a game changer. This is an absolute game changer. And the more we do it with them, just like you're saying, man, then you have the bond and the skill and the experience and the memory. It's gold, man. This is gold. This gets me all excited. I'm taking two of my boys and we are going up into the way up in the northeast of the country. And I've never been up there. And we're just going in the middle of nowhere and we're just going to do some rough camping, awesome experiences, right?
Nice.
But we've been doing that for years. The same, really what you're saying of we'll sit down and we'll say, what do we want to experience? What do we want our kids to learn? And again, this is built in, and I know you're doing this too, as you think through it, like, who do you want your children to be as adults? Like, what's the end game? Like, what's the big vision here, right? And I think, okay, now what are the experiences, memories, lessons they need to learn on the way? And then my wife and I will sit down and be like, okay, what can create that? And then you just start dreaming and say, well, how could we do that? Dude. How could we make that happen? What could we do? And you take your kids and you just go out and you have the most epic experiences, and it makes you that much better of a father and the relationship, but they are that much more capable as well.
Yeah, dude, that's such an important point. I have my guys go through and write down their parenting goal. Because a lot of guys get into it and it's like, oh, we're just going to make it, man, every day, one day at a time. And it's like, okay, good to be mindful, but like, where are you going? If you don't know what direction your ship is setting, like you're going to wind up in the middle of the ocean. You're going to run out of supplies. Yeah. So if you don't know exactly what direction you're going with parenting, so 100%, if you don't have your values, which will help to guide the actual goals you have for your children. I don't mean like they better go to law school, they better become a doctor. Those aren't the type of goals. I mean, are they going to be resilient human beings? Yeah. Are they going to be loving? Are they going to have the ability to feel love and self-respect? Are they going to be like service-oriented? What kind of human beings, not like the doing aspect, but the being aspect, do you want to raise? And then that doesn't just happen by accident. You don't want it to just like get to the point where you're like wiping your hands and, it's been 18 years, they're launched and
we survived.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I wish that, I mean, this seems ridiculous. The guys don't know this better, but I wish that people understood just how impactful dad was. Yep. Like think back to your own childhood, think back to your life. How much of an impact does your dad have? Probably a massive one. In fact, I guarantee it's a massive one. And we don't seem to take that. We seem to take it for granted, actually, I should say, a little bit too much. And we can do so much more. Yep. We can dream so much bigger, like you were saying, for them and come up with these experiences and learnings and guide them along the way to eclipse us as men. Ryan Mickler of Order of Man has this awesome quote where he talks about wanting to make himself obsolete. And I've latched onto that. And it's like, man, that is exactly what I want. I want to carry the burden for my family until I can start to unload it onto them, but when they're ready, rather than all at once, so it crushes them. And I think that's a huge distinction. So I'm going to take that on, but you can be sure that I'm going to make sure they carry it farther than I ever could. And so you got to have goals to get there in the first place, though.
Absolutely. That vision of what you're working to, so what you're working towards, so you're not just drifting along. And then I love what you're saying, where that vision then becomes the guiding foundation of what we do day in and day out and week in and week out. Man, you're so right. We have to get out of this kind of default survival mode. And man, it kills me when I hear people say like, oh, we just got to survive. Like, for example, you hear it a lot with teenagers, right? Teenagers get such a bad rep. They're just like, oh, if we can just survive these teen years. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, the teen years are the best. It's like a culmination of all the parenting you've been doing. It's incredible. But if it's off, like you got to lean in proactively and do something about it and make that change. Man, this stuff is awesome. Okay. Yeah. So what do you think are some of the, and we've already touched on several here. What are the underlying causes of the biggest problems for men and dads, husbands? Like, what are you seeing? What's your observation? Even your own experience. Like, what's the underlying cause there? I love to say, what's the underlying problem? What's the underlying cause of the underlying problem?
Yeah. So when I look at things, I see two things I'm battling against personally in my mission with dad work. One is mediocrity in men, and that is an acceptance of not being excellent. And that, for me, especially in my role as father, that's not acceptable. Average is not good enough. Yep. The second thing I'm fighting against, if you will, is what modern society says is acceptable, which is basically comfort at the expense of virtue. Yep. And that's also unacceptable. So those are the things that I'm trying to help men combat: their own acceptance of mediocrity, and society's acceptance of comfort. And, those don't immediately seem like, oh, they're all that bad, but you look around and I don't know how you could not be scared to death of what's happening to our young children, what they are being taught, what they're being led to believe, who they are being led to believe they are, thinking that they can just, make it up as they go along and not be supported in that. We're not calling up parents to a higher standard. And that's another tragedy. It's like, you got these wine mom Facebook blogs and you got these dopey dad Facebook pages sharing memes. Like, bro, is that what parenting is to you? Yeah. Are you kidding me? You're like making plumbing jokes and wondering, like, it's totally ridiculous.
Or even jokes about their own parenting or lack of parenting. I saw this guy, we took our kids to the water park for my son's birthday on Saturday. And this guy was there with his dad. And I observed him multiple times. There wasn't a lot of people there because it was kind of overcast, which made it sweet for us. There's no lines. But he had this shirt on and it said adulting, 1 star, right? It was a 1-star rating. And then he said, not recommended. And the listeners can guess what he looked like physically.
Dude.
And they can guess how he was showing up as a dad that day.
Mm-hmm.
And he's wearing this around. Like, he's like flaunting this. Like, I don't want to adult. I don't want to parent. I mean, what's he? I just kept thinking, I'm like, dude, you're sitting here walking around saying, I avoid responsibility because it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that can only lead to mediocrity.
Yeah. And then what's underneath that? That is the question, man. Yeah. I try and talk about this stuff as much as I can, and I'm still exploring the why. I think you could go as far back as you wanted. You could go to the beginning of, creation, if you will. You could see original sin. Maybe that's part of it. I'm sure that is part of it. But recently, in terms of like what's happened, I think you've got a generation of men and women who, I mean, dude, I don't know how far back you want to go, but you can go to World War II. You get a lot of men to leave. You get a lot of women in the workforce, and you get fatherless children, even for those few years. And when they come back, they're no longer able to emotionally be there for their kids. And so what does that do? Well, it gives the kids exactly what we've been talking about, which is no direction. And these were hard men. These were good, hard men, but they had been taken out of their world and put into hell. I can't imagine what that did for a generation.
Yep.
And then how many of them died? How many of them did not come back, and they left their wives and their kids like that to find their way alone? And that is tragic. But then what happens after that is those children, without a leadership role and with everything having been so good for a while after, they came back and everything was roaring, you get that meme, which is like, hard men create good times create soft men create hard times, and hard times create good men, strong men. And I think there's some of that going on.
Absolutely.
Where you get into sort of the peace and love and rock and roll generation, and everything gets turned on its head.
Yep.
And we're trying to find out where we're going, who we are, what is there for young people for life, basically. And I think there's just not been an answer that people have enjoyed, because I think as the world's become more globalized, as we get more connected to each other, we just find that we're going to be comfortable. We want everyone to get along. We want everyone to be comfortable. We don't want to do the right thing anymore, because perhaps, and don't quote me on this, there was that dearth of strong men who were not able to come back because they sacrificed it all. So that's one thing that I have suggested, that I have seen. I have a good friend, Will, on Instagram. Ren of Men is his handle. He talks about this stuff a lot in terms of where did this weak society come from. Strongly recommend that. But man, it's just that you bring it to today. Let's just bring it to today for 2 seconds. And you get the guys who are in our shoes, who are parents, who they had a father who wasn't there. And even if you only consider one generation, never mind everything else I just said, if you consider one generation who didn't have a dad who was there for them, and I mean there for them in the way of, yes, they were there physically and financially providing, but they were also there emotionally. And a lot of guys are like, I just need to be hard. Yeah, you do, but you also need to know when and where to apply the emotional empathy and the validation that your kids need to prove to them that they are worth it. That's one of the things that John Eldridge talks about in his books, is like, a boy needs to know that he's got what it takes from his dad, and a girl needs to know that she's worth pursuing. That's where the emotional connection comes in. And if your dad didn't have that because his dad didn't have that, and you're going out into the world and you're launching, like so many of our young people these days, with no direction, no guidance, like I felt, where you don't know what you're actually supposed to do. And if, like, you're just going to go into the easiest path, or what everyone else is doing. And if what everyone else is doing is degenerate, which I think it mostly is these days, man, you're signing your life away. So pardon that enormous rant that was very poorly put together, but those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it aligns really well. I don't know if you've read the book, The Fourth Turning, but he talks about those generations and he just spells it out exactly. I mean, he literally gives evidence. These guys are researchers. They went back 500 years, and without an exception, they saw that pattern that every approximately 20 years is a turning. And they go through the turnings, and they literally describe what you're describing, that each of these generations, and it trickles. There's this trickle effect, or what I call the cascade effect, or it just rolls down. And then we get to a situation where we are, and it can happen as a society, or it can happen, like you're saying, in a family. And I think, man, I want to, well, 2 points. One is, like, I want to emphasize something. Like, we think sometimes we want our sons to be tough, or our daughters to be tough. And so we have to be hard on them. And there's obviously a place for challenge. There's obviously a place for some, like, you got this, let's go, let's push through this. But I'm with you, man. If they know that there's an emotional connection, and it's okay to feel emotions, and it's okay to express themselves, and to have this really healthy emotional well-being from the inside out, I think sometimes we ignorantly think, like, no, if we have this feeling side, then our boys or our kids won't be tough. They won't be able to do hard things. Not true. And as we built this beautiful relationship, my wife and I, with our kids, that the right timing, dude, my teens, they're unstoppable, man. We've taken them to do just grueling, hard things all over the world. And they're like, bring it. Let's go.
Nice.
And they'll set challenges themselves. They're like, I'm going to smile the whole way. I'm going to do this. Wow. I know it's going to kill me, and I'm going to be jovial. I'm going to talk to other people. I'm going to smile. I'm going to stay positive, even though I'm in so much pain from whatever the challenge. We climbed this peak, and we got up to like 18,500. I mean, you get above 14, 15, 16, everything starts to hurt. And my teens are like, let's go. Let's go,
dude.
Like, I want this, right? So your kids can be so tough. In fact, I would argue they'll be tougher if they have a whole soul and a whole being with the emotions and everything that's in there, that's that connection, right?
Dude, that is so inspiring to me. I really appreciate that because my oldest is 9. He'll be 10 in like 4 or 5 months or something like that. And I'm getting to the point where it's like, the rubber is definitely meeting the road here. And everything I'm seeing as either a lesson or a moment to be together so they know I care.
Yep.
And one of the things my friend Jason told me, we're about to go for a hike. And he's like, dude, tough love without love is just tough. It's like, oh, that like blew my mind because, you want to do the tough love thing when so many dads are like, well, I just need authority. Well, dude, if you are requiring like bullying to get your authority, you've already failed.
Yes.
Like you have failed. This is not authority.
Yeah.
This is bullying. And you're not doing a very good job. Yep. So when guys think tough love is it, like it has its time and place, but it requires love underneath that. And if your kids don't feel that love, even if you're like, oh, of course I love them. I work 40 hours a week to provide for them. How could they say it's implied? Bro, if you don't tell your kids you love them, and if you don't show them every single day that they are loved, like even when I screw up, and I screw up a lot because I'm a human being, but when I screw up, man, when I'm sitting with my kids afterwards, first thing I'm doing is not only am I apologizing, but I'm letting them know, even in this moment where I expressed anger or disappointment or whatever I did that was wrong, I love you. And there is nothing you can do to make me not love you. This part's on me. That part's on you. Let's work this out together. But first of all, I love you. And if you can't say that to your kids, if your kids don't know that when you come home from work and you think, oh, they'll pick it up because like I'm doing whatever. Like, no, dude.
No, they
make
won't.
that obvious.
Don't make them assume. Don't make them guess. Don't make them question.
It's one of the saddest things, man.
Is it without doubt? One of the things I like to ask my coaching clients is like, is it so obvious that it would hold up in court? Right? I just love asking that question. Is it so obvious that it would hold up in court? And if your kids are like, man, I don't know, my dad just got after me. I don't know if he loves me. You're like, whoa, you're missing something. You're missing something. Or yeah, my dad works, but I'm not sure why he's doing it. They're questioning motives and things. Yeah, we got to make it more obvious.
Yeah. And I got to tell you guys, like, this is one of those things that we see and we like future project and we go like, oh, I hope my kids aren't like that. That sounds bad. I work with guys who were these kids and who are now adults and are telling me in group, in coaching sessions, did my dad love me? That's a good question. I don't know. He never said it, but I think he probably did. And to watch a grown man say, I don't know if my dad loved me. And then you put the pieces of their life together and you go, no wonder this is so hard. No wonder this hurts so much for you. So dads, right now, if your kids don't explicitly know that you love them, they will grow up to be these men who are always unsure of themselves, because men and boys at least require the fact that they are good enough and their dad has their back and their dad loves them. And if they don't, the entire life becomes a shaky foundation, always second guessing, always being a yes man, always being a nice guy. And that leads to pain and suffering. So if you think that even no matter how young or old or how many times you screwed up as a dad, if you think it doesn't matter, I work with grown-up sons. That's who men are. They are grown-up sons, and man, you're hurting them. This is too important to get wrong. So whatever your, issue is right now, dads, figure it out, because our kids don't wait around for us to figure it out.
And I love that you're emphasizing that. I see the same thing, that the things we do, especially the habits and patterns, there might be little instances, but the habits and patterns especially will stick for decades. 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, it's still a challenge that men are trying to overcome. So, man, we have this, again, awesome privilege and responsibility, even an obligation, to seriously level up and to get ourselves right from the inside out so that we can show up more. It's actually a good transition. I'd love to ask, like, what's working for you? Like habits, patterns, routines, rituals, schedules. What's working for you as a husband, a father, a businessman? What are you seeing out among men? Like what's working?
Man, so I've changed my tune a little bit on this because I finally tried it. And the thing that's working is like just doing more hard things.
Nice.
I know nobody wants to hear that, but I am on fire the last couple of months because I'm taking my own medicine. I have coaches, I have coaching programs that I'm part of. And as I get in there, like I pride myself on being probably like 80 to 90th percentile in discipline and skills and getting stuff done. And, jack of all trades, master of none, but pretty good at a lot of things. And I feel good about that. As soon as I see someone that makes me feel like a lazy SOB, I'm like, oh, I need to sign up. I need to be around you. And so that's what I did. And I'll just drop them a quick note. It's called Superhuman Fathers. And these guys are incredible. Kyle, I had on my podcast recently. So inspiring. So I have been doing more. My schedule these days, I'm up at 4:30. I get up, I do my stretching, I pray, I read the Bible, and I'm out the door. I'm doing a challenge right now. I'm on day 24. It's 400 meters of walking lunges every single day.
Yeah,
and it is
baby.
brutal. It is brutal, man. So I've been picking that up, and then I'll go to the gym 5 days a week, come back, make breakfast for the kids. We're starting homeschool this year. So we're just figuring out how that works. And we just had a big meeting last night. So I'm coming home, doing stuff with the kids. We baked muffins this morning, going to work, coming back out, having lunch with the kids, doing a little bit more work. They've got soccer tonight. They got jujitsu on Wednesday. So like there's all that kind of stuff. But then 5 o'clock rolls around.
The martial arts, hitting the meals. Nicely done.
Yeah. So like the things that are working are, to break it down, you must exercise. I think you must wake up earlier than you are. Yep. You must have some sort of mindfulness, meditation, prayer, journaling ritual, usually as early in the morning. I do it all day. I use a program called Roam, which is like Evernote, but I'm also looking at 4 different journals on my desk. So I'm doing that all day. And then for a lot of guys, if this is not your normal, this is sort of how I started. I just put calendar reminders in my phone. Go compliment your wife. Go do something for her based on her love language, what she most feels loved with. Spend one-on-one time with your kids, at least a little bit every day. And then, garbage time, if you will. I talked to a guy called Isaac on my podcast, Isaac Tolpin. He's got 9 kids. And he's like, dude, quality time is great, but quantity time, if you're present, is almost better because you get to see more about how they react when it's not one-on-one with them. They're feeling special and they're acting differently. You can breathe into their lives better. So spend time with your kid, compliment your wife, do hard things, and have a gigantic purpose that you're always facing. Yes. And I don't know what else to add to that, man. Friends, community, fellowship, brotherhood.
Yeah. And you're hitting, well, you hit some awesome things. Well, way to go on the homeschooling. That's awesome. We homeschool our kids 20 years.
Nice.
Now we're going.
Amazing, man.
We call it world schooling because we take them all over the place. But love that because then it's more time with them and more direction, more responsibility, of course. But that's what you want. I know you're doing meals with your kids, which fully engaged in that, which is awesome. And you're right. I am wholeheartedly an advocate for both quality and quantity. And man, I've learned that like if you want it bad enough, you can make it happen. If you make it a priority, like, put it in first, then the other things will fit. I guess that was one of the things I wanted to, and it fits right now too, that I circle back to before. It's like, whether it's as a society or in your family, like in mine, right? So my dad wasn't there. My stepdads weren't there. And I could still be using that as an excuse. In my 40s, I'd be like, yeah, man, I didn't have a father figure. Like, I don't know what to do. I could still be playing that card. And for a time, like in my late teens, early 20s, dude, I was the mayor of Victimville, man. I was like, no, it's everybody else's fault. But at some point, no matter what lot you were given, no matter what happened to you, all of us, like at some point, gentlemen, we have to draw a line in the proverbial sand and say, from this point forward, my life will be what I make of it. It's going to be mine. And maybe you didn't have a good relationship with your dad. Maybe you didn't even have a dad, right? Or maybe you went through some terrible stuff. Like at some point, yeah, I'm sorry, that's tough. Draw the line and say, from now on. And that's where we can lean into this and take full ownership of everything we're doing. You're right. And just get up early, hit hit the exercise, right? I love the walking lunges, man. I did that. I do that for training. I have a 40-pound vest. So I'll put on my 40-pound vest, go out front with an audiobook, and just lunge and lunge and lunge and lunge and lunge and just burn. But it's phenomenal training for mountain climbing and for racing and adventure racing, all the things I'm doing, right? And so you get out, you get his challenges, and then I love the things you got going on, man. Those are just good, solid habits across the board.
Yeah, and it's not rocket science, man. Like it's
simple.
As I'm putting together my program right now, like my thing is I want to make dads harder to kill and easier to love. Yeah. That's it. You know, like that's mature masculinity, I think.
Expound on both of those, brother. Expound on both.
Okay, so man, I have been thinking about this for a long time, and my own personal vision is to be harder to love. Harder to love, harder to kill, easier to love, and have more resources for affecting change over the next 50 years. And so that covers.
Sorry, you misspoke there, but that's perfect, because a lot of guys inadvertently, kind of the default, they're harder to love and they're quite easy to kill.
Yes.
Like, the default setting is the opposite of what you're talking about, where precisely the intentional, deliberate effort is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And it's just like when you're harder to kill, which just means being, honestly, slightly more fit than the average person these days, which is nothing. When you're harder to kill because you're training, you're disciplined, you have skills, your body is actually working, you've got all these things, and you're not making dumb decisions. That means that you will just simply be more in a place of authority. And that means for yourself, your wife, your kids, you'll be a better leader. You will also not be so weak, so that when things happen in life, and this is why we do hard things, when guys are like, why do you wake up at 4:30? Why do you do cold showers? Why do you do these lunges? Why do you go to the gym every day? It's like, dude, so that when hard things happen, like real hard things, like I'm trying not to scream at my kids, they become a teenager, they make a terrible decision, and I got to be cool with that so that I don't blow it out of proportion and ruin everything. Those are the hard things in life. Those are the challenges. And heaven forbid something happens that's, existential, and I got to deal with that.
Exactly.
But
a real
I'm
crisis
always ready.
up.
Exactly. A real crisis. And nobody's doing that right now. So when I feel harder to kill, because I literally am, I have so much more confidence, and I feel a sense of self-respect. And I think, man, I've been talking to my friend Ryan about this a lot. It's like, men don't need self-love, they need self-respect more than the self-love. So all of these things make me feel like $1,000,000. Dude, this morning, I have been dreading this morning all week, because it's leg day. It's day 24 of my lunge challenge, and I didn't get a great sleep. And I am just bagged. So I'm waking up and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I'm dragging my feet a little bit. I get outside like 5 minutes later than I usually do. Crush my lunges. I'm like, okay, I think we got this. Go to the gym, and it's like, oh, squats, weighted lunges, more squats, Romanian deadlifts. Like, dude, I don't want to do this. But as soon as I did it, and then I crushed an ab workout afterwards, I felt unstoppable. You can guarantee I came home and I was with my kids and I was smiling and I was happy. I was serving my family because I was harder to kill. Yes, but dude, that made me easier to love. The other side of that, yes, it's simply just being a better human being. So you're easier to love in the first place. You're serving more. You're being less selfish. You're actually sacrificing for your family. You're holding their burden on your back gladly and rejoicing about it. But you're also then learning the skills that most of us didn't get from our parents to be emotionally in tune, like we were talking about before. Can you express your love? Can you be there with your kid or your wife when she is expressing something and you're not like trying to fix it? You're not being like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why don't you just do this? You're actually holding that space and just being there and being present and being loving and being empathetic and being validating and affirming your kids. You can't do that if you're some knucklehead who thinks emotions are weak. Dude, they are not weak. It's one of the hardest things in the world to have control over your emotions. That is strongman stuff. So yeah, I want to be harder to kill, easier to love, because I will then become the best father and husband and man. And dude, I'll inspire people. My kids are going to want to follow that, because who wouldn't want to do that? And I think there's a sense of inherent goodness about that. When I hear that, I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but I want that. I want to be harder to kill and easier to love, because those are good things. And that's what a good man does. So anyway, that's a little bit about where I'm headed right now.
Huge. I love it, man. And I want to just reemphasize a couple of things you said there. Like, when we will make space to just listen, just hear, Just understand, be fully present, not on the phone, not distracted by our own stuff, not whining about our own problems, just fully there. And then, yeah, expressing emotions, expressing desire, being whole, and being, when it's your turn to share, like being all in and sharing that love. You're right. It circles back again and again, and it wins admiration and respect. And that is how we get influence, right? Influence is always earned.
Yes.
And if
100%.
you are harder to kill and easy to love, you'll have the influence and you'll have the respect. And especially, man, I cannot emphasize this enough. I try to say this every time I have an opportunity to speak or teach. I try to say this. Most men lose influence with their kids when they become teens and young adults, because men are usually leveling off instead of leveling up. And they become easier to kill and harder to love, right? Using the phrases there. But if we stay on our A game, just as a way of, just a way of being, this is just how we do life. We get up early, we do hard things, we push ourselves. You just stay on your A game, then you're harder to kill and easier to love, and you're ready for whatever's coming.
Yeah. And you know what, it's funny, like there's all these things out there, like 75 hard, it's awesome, and all these kind of things are challenges. And then guys finish them, they're like, oh man, I feel good about myself because I completed it. And then they go back to their old ways. It's like, bro, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
We had people over last night, and one of them was like, so like, when does this program end? It's like, never.
Exactly.
It will never end, because I will never stop trying to be harder to kill and easier to love. And the thing about that is too, like, dude, I made a post on Instagram the other day, which is like, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's like, real men can bench press their wives and outrun their kids. Dude, I am not gonna let that go. I will not let that go, because dude, I want to be there pushing them. Because like you said, if I level off, suddenly their trajectory is, my kids, my sons especially, they're going to try and keep up with me. No matter what I'm doing, they're going to want to follow it. So if your life sucks, your kids' lives are probably going to suck until they get out of your influence. But why don't you just make their lives awesome by pushing them? And if you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour until the day you die, and I mean that not to burn yourself out, but to be whole and rounded and stuff like that too. If you're doing that, they're never going to do that. What you just said, which is sort of like eclipse and go over this flatlining dad. Their lives are going to be epic as long as you're loving them through that and not shaming them to be better than you are. That's, I guess, a little caveat.
And leading the way. Exactly. Leading the way. Oh man, I love this, brother. I get so excited about this.
Yeah, right.
I love seeing and feeling your passion for it, and you're just nailing these critical points for all of us, that it is within our power, all of us. I don't care where anyone who's listening, I don't care where you're at, where you've come from. It's within our power at any moment to just pause and say, I'm going to choose a better way. Like, I'm going to pick an area of my life that's maybe a little weak. I haven't been showing up, and I'm just going to lean into it. And I always tell people, it's astounding how quickly results can come. How quickly you can transform your life in a few months. Your life could be beyond recognition. Like, I can't even believe we were living like that, and now we get to live like this. Yeah, you can make those transformations. So totally. Powerful.
Yeah, and guys, nobody's coming to save you. This is the thing. Nobody is coming to save you. And the sooner you accept that instead of being a victim, the better things are going to be. Yeah. And you'll probably have to let go of things being the other way. And that's one point that I don't hear talked about a lot. I had to grieve to remove myself from Victimville, as you were saying. Mm-hmm. Like, I had to be like, oh, that's never happening. I'm never getting the ideal childhood, or like whatever it was that was holding you down. It's like, I'm never getting that. And I got to be sad about that for a while. And then I can move forward, because I know it's not like, it's literally chaining me to the past. Yep. Whereas I need to be forward looking and have a massive vision and have daily habits. And I got to clear those roadblocks, like I think we were talking about before. But you got to sometimes grieve them. But again, it's you. You are the one responsible. And I tell guys this sometimes: whatever happened to you in your life, especially as a kid, probably not your fault, but it is 100% your responsibility, because only you can change your life. Yep. So it's not your fault. Let go of the guilt. Now it's your responsibility. If you're not doing anything with that, maybe you deserve to feel a little bit of guilt and shame to fire you up. Get angry about the fact that your life isn't awesome.
Use it.
Yeah, use it for fuel, man. And like you said, it could take literally one small change to ignite an entire fire in your life. I can't imagine if you just picked one thing. And I got my guys doing like self audits. It's like a wheel of life where they give themselves scores 1 to 10 in like 10 areas. And it's like, dude, what is the thing over the next 30 days? You can take this from a 2 to a 5. Let's just start with that if you're having a hard time with this. I mean, 2 to a 10, we'll get there, but 2 to a 5 over a month. And it's like, oh, I guess I could like do 30 minutes of exercise every day. Exactly. Dude, you can't do 30 minutes of exercise for 30 days. If like there are so many things that we will put up with and not do the hard thing a little bit. Like, dude, 30 minutes out of a 24-hour day. Are you really telling me you can't suffer for 30 minutes? Come on. But at the end of that 30 days, that 5 is going to look much closer to a 10 because now the rest of your life is following suit with all that discipline and all that drive. Man, this stuff is exciting. If guys have not got on this, you got to get on this, guys.
You're going to feel so much stronger, so much better about yourself.
Yeah.
There's so much power. And what, like you were saying a moment ago, where there's pain, there's power. And if they're feeling some pain, turn that pain into power. Yeah. And if there's pain in the past, like what you were saying a moment ago, it's like we have 100% responsibility. In fact, you and I and each of us, we are the only ones. You are the only one that you can't change your past, but you can change the way you see your past. And only you can do that. And when you can see the benefit and the value from it, now it becomes an experience of power. It actually gives you fuel.
It's so important to reframe that. I have learned in my life that my biggest strengths, all of them grew in the gardens of my deepest wounds.
Yep.
Every one of them. And so I look back on everything that's happened to me and I just give thanks.
Yep.
Like, man, thank God I struggled and suffered because now I get to have the gifts that came from that. So if you're struggling and suffering, man, I can't imagine what happens when you start tilling that garden, pull up a couple of weeds and start tending to it. You are going to be super, just amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's switch gears here a little bit. Is there anything you haven't talked about yet that you personally are chasing? Just something you're super excited about, focused on? Is there anything you're kind of obsessing about? It's like just a personal thing where you're like, you know what? I'm going.
Dude, that's hard because it's all intertwined. It's all in that big vision. For me right now, like I'm super into pushing myself fitness wise. I want to get to, low enough body fat to get ab veins. I am chasing those ab veins, man. I am so disciplined with my diet, with my gym, crushing it like that. So that's one of the things. And also like brotherhood and fellowship. Yeah. I thought for many years, like I'm so tough, I'm so cool, I don't need friends. What a mistake. So I'm trying to go all in on just developing friendships and relationships with other good men who are doing good things that I want around my kids. Yep. And it's taking a lot of work and taking a lot of time because you're investing in people. But man, between fitness and relationships, that's where I'm heading in the next sort of like 90 to 365 days outside of this homeschool thing, which, dude, I'm super interested to hear more from you because it's intense, awesome, man, but it's so good.
Awesome. Yeah.
So that's me, man. I'm excited to get back into the hockey season here personally.
Nice.
But that's it.
That's right. Up north, man. I love hockey in Canada. That's awesome, man.
That's right.
Love it. All right. Anything else it's on your heart or mind that you haven't said yet or talked about? Anything else you want to share?
I think I feel I feel good, man. Like I would love to leave you with like this little clip, but I think honestly, go back and listen to everything we talked about and listen again.
Hit so many good things right there. So, okay. How can people connect with you, brother?
The best way is on Instagram, dadwork.curt, dadwork.curt. That's where I'm most active. I think there's like 50,000 people on there now. Dad.work is our website. So you can find coaching applications, group opportunities, resources, podcast as well. Apple, Spotify, all the rest of it. So that would be awesome to hear from you guys.
Love it, brother. Thank you again so much for being on here and sharing all this.
Yeah, man. Thank you for this platform and thank you for your fire because I am fired up because of you.
This has been a great conversation, man. I love it.